Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another week of online music learning. This week we are talking about the bass guitar. That's the instrument that you see right here. So as a quick review before we get started, last week we talked about acoustic and electric guitars. We learned that those guitars have 6 strings. They can play chords, they can play guitar solos, they can play different rhythms if you're a rhythm guitarist. So we learned a lot of that stuff. Some of that stuff is going to apply to the bass guitar, but there's a lot of differences in playing the bass guitar than we learned about with the electric and acoustic guitars. So let's first start off by taking a look at the bass. The bass itself does not have 6 strings like a regular guitar does. The bass guitar has 4 strings. I'll play them for you now. That's string 1, that's string 2, that's string 3, and that's string 4. So there are 4 strings in total. Now, the bass guitar is part of a section in popular music that we call the rhythm section. The rhythm section really gives a lot of music the kind of driving force behind it and adds a lot of fullness to the sound that we hear. If you had a song without a bass guitar, without a drum set, all you would have is your 2 electric guitars, your keyboard, and your vocalist. There would be no one keeping a beat on drum set for you. There would be no bass guitar to play those really low sounds to help fill out the sound of your group. Now, just because I said low sounds, as you notice with the bass guitar, it is very low in pitch. In fact, it is much, much lower in pitch than a normal guitar. So if I play you the lowest note on a bass, it's very low in pitch. It's very rumbly. It's very deep. These are all words we could use to describe the pitch of this instrument. So before we continue, let's just do a brief overview of the parts of the bass guitar. Most every single part of this instrument is the same as the electric guitar in terms of what they do. So we're going to start from top and we're going to work our way down. So up here we have the head of the instrument. Now on the head there are these little pegs right here. These are called tuning pegs. The tuning peg allows me to change the pitch of the string of my instrument in order to tune it so that when I play a song it sounds correct. Then if I follow it down, right here, all of this is what we call the fretboard. And on the fretboard there are these little metal bars which we call the frets. What the frets do, as a reminder, is when I put my finger down on a fret, I change the pitch of a string. So the further down the frets I go, the higher the pitch, and then the further up, the lower the pitch. So I'll show you now. And that's all on the same string, and I can make the pitch go down by going backwards. So that's the fretboard and the frets. Now down here at the bottom, we have our pickups again. As a reminder, what the pickups did is the pickups capture the sound, or they pick up the sound that the strings are making, and they send them out through a cord to a speaker so that the bass guitar can be heard. Now, if I did not have my bass guitar plugged into a speaker, I'm going to plug it real fast. If I play without a speaker, it's going to be almost impossible for you to hear. And that was because I was playing it as hard as I possibly could. So for that reason, especially if you're in a band, your bass guitar needs a speaker to be heard. It needs a speaker to be heard. I can't stress that enough. Because what I just played, I'll play it again with the speaker, and I'm not even going to play it as loud as I did. Now, let's talk a little bit more about how these pickups work. I know we've already mentioned them, just a quick review. When a string vibrates, and I'll bring the guitar closer so you can see this. When I pluck a string, it vibrates. Let me do it with the red one. So you can see it vibrating, you can see it shaking. And when it vibrates over the magnets, it's disrupting the magnetic field. You know, we talk about the north end of magnets and the south end of magnets and how to make them attract. And if I put a north to a north, they repel. That's because of the magnetic field. So this is a metal string that's going across the magnetic field. And when it shakes like that across the field, it sends that sound out. through the cable to the speaker. Now, the reason we need the speaker, just to reiterate it again, is because last week we saw that an acoustic guitar was hollow, right? It was a lot wider than this and had empty space on the inside. The bass guitar is not hollow. It is solid wood, it is very heavy, and because it's solid wood, there is nothing on the instrument for the sound to escape out and make louder. So that's why we need the speaker. Now, while we're talking about the different parts of the instrument, I want to pay attention a little bit to the length of the instrument. Compared to an acoustic guitar and electric guitar, the bass guitar is a lot longer than either of those instruments. The neck is much, much longer, and that's because the pitches are so low and the strings are so thick, it takes a little bit more space per fret to change the notes. Now, let's talk a little bit about how I'm playing the guitar and how it's different than playing an acoustic or electric guitar. So last week we learned a lot about the different ways we play guitar in terms of playing guitar solos, in terms of playing riffs, and in terms of playing chords. So the bass guitar very rarely gets the solos of the piece just because it's such a low-pitched instrument that if it's playing solos, it might get lost in the mix of the sound of your group. So what the bass guitar does instead is it plays chord roots, so it's one note at a time. It does not play full chords, because if I played a full chord, it would sound extremely muddy and hard to listen to. It's just a lot of noise. So it does not play chords, it plays what we call chord roots, which is just one note in each chord. Okay, so now when I put all of these little notes together, we get something called a bass line. A bass line is a combination of notes that is kind of like a riff, but the difference is the bass line is constantly repeating, and it's very rhythmic and it's very low sounding, and it's kind of driving the sound of your group. It's kind of pushing you forward. So Billie Eilish's Bad Guy was an example that I played at the beginning. It's a very classic example of a bass line. Okay. Now, with the bass lines as well, there are a lot of very popular bass lines. It's going to be impossible to go through all of them. One that many people recognize is Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. So we have... Okay, so that's a very popular bass line. And if you notice, for the bass lines I've played so far, I'm only ever playing one string at a time with one note. Now for the bass guitar, there's usually only one bass guitar in each group. The reason for that is because it's such a low sounding instrument and some of the lowest pitches sound very muddy. If you have two instruments playing in the same range, they start competing with each other and your sound gets very wishy-washy and muddy, and it's just not clear to listen to. It's not enjoyable to listen to. So usually you only have one bass guitar in each group.